couple of weeks. So it's great to see the turnout that we have, and kind of stole a little bit of space here. We typically have our interviews, our post-game interviews, and other media things that take place in here. So it's still a great environment to have this type of dialogue and conversation. One of the ideas here is really born in the fact that one of our pillars within the West Coast Conference, and this is even seen in our strategic plan, is the notion of leadership. And through that, for leadership for us is not just leadership in the sense of with our student athletes and the things that we do surrounding their growth and development, but also us as administrators, young and more experienced professionals in the field, and what we can do to continue to grow professionally and develop those skills. So that's part of the notion behind this and the foundation of bringing this group together. And through that, too, is to really talk about, as professionals, as we look to continue to progress in our careers, how do we frame that future? Thus the theme today. Look at that. I did not come up with that, by the way, at all. I really don't have that degree of creativity. And I learned a long time ago that one of the things to do is to surround yourself with people where you know that you're not as strong. So I make sure I have those people around me. So I do want to give credit and kudos to my staff that was really instrumental in pulling this together. So thank you for being here, first of all. And this is something that we were looking at potentially growing in the future surrounding this event because we think it's great, not just in the context of the celebration of West Coast Conference basketball at this event, but our conference itself and the values that we have. And we have a great audience here and people that we think we can give back in this way and provide this type of environment for you all to work with, to get to know one another, and also some opportunities that you may not have otherwise. So we're really looking forward to any feedback you want to provide or ideas for the future. We know it's a very, very busy time, but we have a captive audience and some things we think we can capitalize on. So in that vein, the conversation today, the dialogue, we were really trying to make this somewhat of an informal conversation between Patti and myself, and then also provide the opportunity for you to ask her some questions in this setting. And then we're going to close out with me throwing some quick hit questions at her. It is we are being streamed on YouTube, the YouTube channel. So, and there was so there will be some people watching. Just be aware, but ignore the cameras and all of that. But we wanted to make sure that for those that couldn't be here, also had the opportunity, access to see this. So, thanks again to Jeff and the rest of the staff that made that happen. So, to get this started here, and the notion of framing your future, that's the theme. Let me first introduce Patti Phillips, our guest here. And Patti is a great friend of mine that we've have been professional colleagues, but I think even more importantly have become really close friends over the years. And as we continue to grow and develop in our own professional lives and personal lives, as I said before, it's really important to surround yourself with people that really help you. It's kind of that inner circle, if you will, and Patti's one of those people for me that over the years, as our friendship has grown and blossomed, she's really been one of those people that is, and you'll see as you'll hear as she speaks, the type of energy that she brings and just the commitment and passion behind what she does and how that inspires people, not just me as a female in this profession, but I think anyone that she crosses paths with. So Patti's been the CEO of NACWAA, and I'll give her a chance here to talk a little bit about NACWAA. Since 2010. At the time she became CEO, I was on the board of directors and went through the experience of selecting the CEO at that time. And through all of that, I had already known Patti before, but I think that also provided a great platform for our friendship to grow and develop there. Prior to that, she spent 11 years as the executive director of Win for KC. And through that, there's several events that she may reference a little bit here that she was involved in the Kansas City area. One of those was Champ Win, which is an event for youth of Kansas City. Camp Win.
They made them champs, but Camp Win.
Yeah. Okay. You made good. And then Win for KC, which is one of the largest in the region women's triathlons in Kansas City. She helped put that event on. She also, some other things in her career, she did color commentary for women's basketball in particular and events for years, such as the Big 12 Women's Basketball Championship. She also, prior to that, served for a period of time at the NCAA National Office, even back in the day, and I think that's when we first met, when it was in Kansas City, and she was the Champs Life Skills Coordinator when the NCAA National Office really had that program being run out of that office. She's also a former head women's basketball and volleyball coach at Ottawa University in Kansas. She's got her undergraduate degree from Baker University, and she was recently inducted into the Baker University Hall of Fame. She has her master's degree from the University of Kansas, which I personally have a really difficult time, but it's okay. And that's
right.
really, that's because yes, because my undergrad is from Kansas State, but that's okay. And then I think another impressive thing is just recently, over the last couple weeks, it was announced that Patti's being inducted into the Missouri Hall of Fame. So we're really excited for you to be here today. And as we so for those that aren't aware, just real quick, some other tidbits of my background. I spent 16 years at the NCAA National Office prior to starting in October 2012 at the West Coast Conference, and then this past June was named commissioner. And as I mentioned, I went to Kansas State University, played women's basketball there, also have master's degrees from the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, and Purdue University, I have an MBA. So we'll reference that because I think at some degree in the conversation we may talk a little bit about kind of being that lifelong learner and continuing education and all of that, and the fact we all work in higher education. Yep. So, okay, so to get started here, as I introduced you, we talked a little bit about Win for KC and NACWAA and kind of this notion of those professional experiences. Do you want to speak a little? Would you speak a little bit about those organizations and really kind of what those organizations did and kind of the value alignment, the concept for you with those?
Well, when the NCAA moved, I had been a volunteer at Win for KC, and I tell young people this all the time, that so many times in life your job opportunities flow through volunteer opportunities and other things, and that's what happened with Win for KC. I'd been a volunteer for quite some time, didn't want to move to Indianapolis, and so got in on the nonprofit side of sports. Win for KC is part of the Kansas City Sports Commission and Foundation. So as you know, you all work with your sports commissions in your communities, and they're about economic development through sport. So putting on events, recruiting events, those type of things. Win for KC, the women's side, we were more focused on empowering girls and women through sports and fitness. So we leveraged what we had at the Sports Commission and really expanded it for the women, the girls and women in our community. What's interesting, though, is that during my time at Win, I went to NACWAA every single year. Well, actually, I was at Win for 11 years, and I went to the NACWAA convention for 10 out of those 11 years. And my first NACWAA convention was when I was at the NCAA, but what I found through NACWAA, and that's what we've tried to continue to make it, was this network of professional women that were all striving to be better and to grow. So even though I wasn't in intercollegiate athletics, I continued to go to that convention, and that's how we would run into each other. You forgot to mention at the NCAA, we actually battled on separate basketball leagues. You were on the NCAA league, on different teams. I'm
pretty sure we won.
And I was on the Renegade team, and I think we battled for the championship, and if you want to tell them how that went, that'd be fine.
I'm pretty sure the way I remember it is we won.
We won it. Oh my gosh! Ask Kathleen
Every
Kunkel.
year
That
the
will go
story
down.
gets better.
So, so anyway, those relationships continued over the years, obviously, and what I felt like was great at Win, kind of the local connection to not only athletic people involved in sports, but the corporate women, the corporate men, people that understood the benefit and the value of sports and fitness. And then, still kind of keeping a foot on the intercollegiate athletic side through doing the color commentary or color analyst for women's basketball, but also through NACWAA was a really important part of my professional growth during that time.
So when you just spoke about Win for KC and your experience there, and also now through NACWAA, you kind of have this different relationship, if you will, or different vested interest in intercollegiate athletics. Talk a little bit about the differences or similarities between that nonprofit world and college athletics, and in particular what we're seeing now in college athletics.
Well, before I get to that broader picture, I will tell you, at Win, we were a nonprofit. So running the nonprofit thing and being in that world where it's 0 to 0 every year, which means every year you're making your own money. So that part of the business aspect is still the same. The focus area through the nonprofits, what's different. And now, obviously, rather than the local community, it is intercollegiate athletics. And, I will tell you, I think I told some of the group last night, I think a downfall with intercollegiate athletics is it's very narrow focused. And when we get in, it's kind of like so insular. And that was one of the reasons I almost didn't take the job. I felt like I had a broader base of interactions. I don't think that's the case. Now I do think there's a lot of different entities involved, and I think that's something we have to be careful of. I mean, it's very insular. It's insular in our campuses and our departments and in our sports broadly sometimes. And the problem with that is people on the outside have a completely wrong view about what's going on with intercollegiate athletics because they only get it from what they read in the newspapers. They're not interacting enough with us to know what we're doing. So we try to help bridge that as well in communications. And I know, obviously, I think everyone in our industry is doing a better job of reaching out because the messaging is important. I mean, it sends a message to the broader. We're a microcosm of society, everything that we do. And so having that connection to the broader society and culture and having them understand what we're about, which is the student-athlete experience, the growth you get through these experiences is important. And they're not getting that, obviously, through the media.
Yeah. So kind of let's zone in on kind of the theme of this session here, the framing your future. So I'm going to go through a series of questions here. First, a general overall, and then we'll kind of get to what I'll, for lack of anything better, 3 different stages that we typically see of professionals in their career. And this is regardless of men or women, whatever the case may be. First, as we've talked about the organizations you've been involved in, and those are whether you worked for the organizations, in the organizations, or have been member of an organization, a professional organization. Describe how important being engaged in those types of organizations is for professionals throughout their careers.
So the importance of professionals getting involved with other associations outside of where they are. I think the biggest reason I just mentioned is we get, we sometimes we work so hard and we're so focused. We think our experience is the only experience that's happening. And so much growth happens by understanding and communicating with other people about where their experiences are. And so that crossover, I think, is where the true growth happens. So in fact, we're trying to do more with corporate women, getting them involved because they have the same experience that we have as women in athletics. There's not enough women leaders. It's really hard to have a family and be a leader. But that interaction of those similar stories, there's real growth and actually resiliency that can come from that. So I think it's critical to get outside your department, to get off your campus, to get involved in community activities. The book I'm reading now has a whole chapter on, we're here as humans and we want to feel like we're making a contribution and that we're growing all the time. And sometimes it's hard to see that in what you're doing every day. And the reality is that's where you are making the biggest difference. But sometimes when you step out and you get involved with other people's causes, whatever those are, it shines a bigger light on things, again, outside ourselves, but then they shine a light back on you and what you're doing. So I think it's huge, really, really important.
So you just referenced in your comments there, one of the books that you're reading right now, and I know that you read all the time. Talk about kind of that and why is that important for you? And if someone were to ask you, like, why should I read these leadership books or whatever? Why do you do it?
Sometimes I don't know why. I am a crazy avid reader. I want to say I'm a crazy avid learner. But I don't know. I always feel like there's more. We can always be doing better. And for me, and I think everyone learns in different ways, I take it in from other people's experiences and when they, or other people's insights a lot of times. Or it allows me the opportunity to reflect and relate that to what I'm doing. You're going to laugh right now. I'm reading a book called The Charged Life. And people would say, you don't need any more charge. But I want to feel like I'm alive every minute and that I'm making a difference every minute. And I don't know that I always do that. And so I don't know. I'll go to seminars, but then read. I think the reading thing is that everyone can do it. There's no excuse. It doesn't cost a lot of money. You can read online for free. People share books. It's the best, easiest way to learn and grow. And one thing we talk about in our institutes is, I think John Maxwell said it, growth doesn't happen automatically. We think just because we age, we grow and we get better. And actually, no. You get better because you try harder and you actually reflect on circumstances in your life about what you did, what you would do different, how that went. And also through communications like we do, I maybe should have handled that differently. That's how growth happens. It doesn't happen because you woke up the next morning. That's resiliency maybe happens that way, or you get through life, but growth happens with intention. And for me, reading is a part of that.
Okay, so we go to the career stages here, and we have, even just by looking at the audience, I can guess that we have people at different stages of their career, and people probably have, and we spoke a little bit about this last night, just personally, regardless of their age, but just kind of where they are in their lives themselves, they may have different aspirations or things that they are looking to do professionally. So those that are probably earlier earlier in their professional careers. What's a piece of advice that you would give to young professionals right now just beginning their careers in college athletics?
I have a whole list of them, and the number one thing is to work hard, to be gritty, to grind it out. And I know that sounds really simple, and they're not doing it. It's fascinating. I think there's and I shouldn't say they, that's a generalization. There's some, and I hear this from our colleagues that are hiring, that, you know, it's great we have this empowerment generation and everyone wants to go and be and do, and that's awesome. And you get there by doing it really, really well and by working really, really hard. I think our culture, unfortunately, has sent messages that things just come to us. And so it's not all individuals' fault, but I think as you know, employers, mentors, older friends, the one thing you can say is work hard. Anybody that works hard, you're going to find a niche somewhere. Come early, stay late, do it really well, you know, whatever it is. But it's the simplest thing. My first theory, work hard, work smart, work on yourself. But work hard, being gritty, grind it out is number one. I mean, that's how you stand out. And as athletes, we know that. You know, never just came to us. We had to work hard. We shot extra shots in the gym. You know, you knew I was going to be defending you in that game. And so you were working on those things or whatever it was. But, you know, so that translates into our work, too. You have to work hard. It is simple, but it is the number one thing.
Yeah. You know, it's one of the things that I've heard really, I think, resonated with me early in my career was this whole notion of, you know, you aspire often for this next position and everything, but it's the whole notion of do the job you were hired for here and be awesome at it, because then, you know, things that people are going to recognize and know that, and you start to develop that brand, that reputation about that you are a hard worker and people can rely on you, and then it kind of, to some degree, it starts to take care of itself. It doesn't totally,
right,
but it starts to.
I think it does, actually. But the other thing with that, that if you, and I just read this the other day, that young people now are getting online and they're understanding how they, you know, they can kind of fake it in an interview sometimes. But the other thing is, what I tell young people is you're interviewing every day for your next job. And that's what people, and we're learning this in intercollegiate athletics. You know, talented people in these pools, it's not just about what they've done and they're showing up in that moment and being really good. It's your career resume. So every day you are interviewing. We get that, I think, as we get older. I think young people, and we just talked about it last night about the Facebook and all that, the social media. You're interviewing for your next job, for your life, every day. Every interaction you have is showing up somewhere. It's helping you show up in life. And I don't think young people are really intentional about that.
You know, we often hear, and you mentioned this in your earlier comments, this notion of mentors. And, you know, whether it's, you know, people, professionals throughout our careers, you know, I know I've been asked the question in interviews, you know, who are your mentors? Who's in part of your inner circle? Who do you go to for advice? For younger professionals, talk about mentorship and being a mentee. What does that look like, both in the formal aspect but also the informal?
Well, the other part of that, when I talk to young people now about mentoring, is I start them with modeling. I think, and mentoring is awesome, we'll get to that, but also as a younger group, I think that they should model. They look at people that are doing the job they want to do. Who has a skill set that you want, or how is that person interacting in a certain circumstance, or your intern should be modeling your staff that's doing a great job here. How are they interacting with people? How are they setting things up? So part of it is, until you can kind of get that formal mentor thing, it's looking at who's doing things really well and what can you learn from that. Anyone can model behavior. It's not making yourself into someone else. It's just watching people that are really good and what do you learn from that. And then the mentoring thing is huge. We could talk about mentoring for an entire hour. I think there's formal and informal. I almost think that informal mentoring is just as powerful, sometimes if not more powerful. I think some young people have come to me and said, you know, I asked someone to be my mentor and they're too busy. And it's not like you always have to ask someone to sign up and dotted line on the mentoring. That is fantastic. I think that moves more into a sponsoring and championing kind of relationship. My greatest mentor, Janet Justice, I never asked her. You know, she hired me and we ended up creating a relationship beyond work, and now I only worked for her for 2 years, but throughout life, where she was still someone that I could go to, that guided me, that we had communication back and forth, and it was two-way. So So I tell young people, number one, to model people. Number two, first, look at your informal mentoring relationships, whether it's parents or family or aunts or uncles or, people that you work with. You're mentoring people, your staff, whether or not they're saying, Lynn is my mentor. We're always mentoring, but then you can be more intentional about, okay, I want to go here. Can you help me get there? That would be the more formal type of mentoring. And I think you kind of have to work up into that because it's a two-way street. And the young person, I think the best way to be a mentee is to give back, meaning you're giving to the relationship. You're not always asking, you're contributing. And now for us, we say, well, what can young people say? Well, what can I offer? Well, I don't know anything about Instagram. It's kind of like you're in a whole different generation, and how do we help each other interact? I know we have to bring that up here before we're done. So we're always learning, and so it is two-way. And I think the young person has to be in a space where they understand that I am contributing, and to always say, what can I do for you? How can I give back? Just even asking that question. And being really intentional about what they want from someone's time. What are you looking for? I think they have to really know. And the problem is sometimes young people just ask for a mentor because they want to say they're connected with someone. And if it's not a true give-back relationship that goes back and forth, it normally doesn't sustain, and then it's not really a mentor relationship.
So as we transition into another stage of careers, I would say the midpoint of a lot of people's careers, that's often the period of time in which we are presented with the question, and many of us are asked, what's next? What do you want to do? What else do you want to do? Or do you want to take that leadership position? Do you want to be an athletic director? Do you want to be part of a senior management team? Those types of questions start to get presented to people. And through that, the notion of presumably you've been really good at your job up to that point, because otherwise people wouldn't be asking you that. Mm-hmm. But I think many of us face this notion that we have been siloed. We are put in a certain place within our profession because we're really good at it, and it's hard to bust out of it. So do you have any comments about that statement and kind of the notion of how do we rebrand ourselves?
Yeah. First, I want to get to the first thing you said about in mid-career when people say, what's next? And I do want to just preface this by saying, I think as humans, our potential is so much greater than what we know and what we give ourselves credit for, especially for women. And so when people say to you, what's next? What do you want to do? Or have you thought about this? I think you need to listen. I think the universe brings people in your life for a reason. And for men and women, I mean, I think if you talk to every person that's a leader and every whatever, they all didn't say, yes, that's what I want. You go through life and things happen and doors open and someone says, I see this in you. I see that in you. And you have to listen to that. So first of all, it's easy just to kind of go and be, and just kind of go along. I think our potential is greater than that and that we're called to be greater. So then when you get in that position, how you break out in your personal brand, first of all, we're building it our entire career. Mm-hmm. Every day, that goes back to the interviewing for the job. We're building it in everything that we do. And I think there's always room to branch out and bust out because people always need help. Everybody is understaffed. We were just talking about it. Everybody's understaffed. And for someone to raise their hand and say, hey, I want to help in that area, can go a long way. And how do they trust you? Because you have developed a brand, because you've been really, really good at your niche. Be really, really good. Be the best person at what you do in your niche, and then you can branch out. And Lynn, you are such a great example of this. That, Lynn and I knew each other tangentially, kind of. But then we worked together. The first time we really worked together was on the board. And what I noticed immediately about Lynn, she was the most organized, on top of it, follow up, everything on her committees, boom, 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 as you can imagine. And you notice things like that. So she's really good at her job at the NCAA. She's a rock star in her thing. But then she says one day, I want to branch out. Now, some people would say, you were in membership services, governance, whatever that's called. That's really hard to break out of. And she intentionally did that. And I think the first reason why you were able to do it is because you're really, really good. And guess what? Everyone can be really, really good. Be good at your job. Be good at your job. It's not that hard. I mean, follow through. And when you do that, you're noticed. And then people are like, yeah, Lynn, absolutely, I'd want Lynn on my team. Any team, whatever team, volleyball team, I would take her. Ice hockey, whatever, I would take Lynn on my team anytime because she gets stuff done. So that's the one thing. Number one, you said, I want to branch out. And then you start reaching out to other people, say, I want to do things differently. And we'll get to the whole career path thing because I think you're such a great story about getting the skill sets you need, acquiring new skill sets. We can do that as humans. You can acquire skill sets. You read, you do things, you work with people, and that's what you did. But the first thing you did was ask, and you stepped out of your comfort zone. And I remember us talking about that. You way stepped out of your comfort zone. And so if you feel like you are pigeonholed, at first, that's okay, because that means you've been focused and really good. But if as soon as you notice that, start asking questions, start offering, raise your hand and stepping out, and then it begins to unfold.
And I think one of the other, given the place I was at the national office, there were opportunities and to do some things different. And what I often tell people about that is I was a director in what's now called academic and membership affairs, and many in the room I crossed paths with early in my career because it was kind of this compliance governance angle, and that's what membership services, academic and membership affairs now did. And in order for me to get in different rooms, that was how I got into the rooms, is because they needed someone like me with that background. But my motivation to get in that room was different than their motivation for having me. And because of that, I was able to get involved more with coaches associations and develop those relationships with the Genos and the Muffet McGraws of the world and everything like that, and learn and try to understand what they were experiencing as coaches, because I didn't live in their world. It was how I got into the board of directors rooms and crossed paths with presidents and developed those relationships, is because they needed someone like me in that room. So that it was intentional on that part. And I don't think it was being conniving or anything like that. I mean, it was very open as I worked with my vice president about where I was trying to go professionally. So it was intentional.
And you bring up a great point too. Another way to do that is through service on other boards. That all the NCAA, all that are on the governance and all the different NCAA committees is huge, and the NACWAA board of directors. There's all sorts of different boards and groups you can get involved in, and what that does is it exposes you and your skill set to a different type of person, and also allows you to interact and grow in a different way. And the other thing that we might get to in the next question, but I think it relates here, if you want to be in a different role, start hanging out with different people. And that was true when I was at Win for KC. I was the executive director of the Win, but I wasn't the big boss over the sports commission. And I wanted to be a CEO, so I was hanging out with CEOs. And I think what happens is we hang out with our peer group. And first of all, your peer group is huge because we're a peer group, and you help each other as you go up. But if you want to be in a different role, you have to hang out with people in those roles because they see you differently, and that's that modeling thing. You pick up on things. So if you want to be a commissioner, you started hanging around commissioners. And I think it's a subtle, understated thing that's so important. It also gives you confidence. You start seeing how they're interacting with people. You're listening to those conversations differently. So there's all those things, and it is important to kind of say, what do I aspire to be? And aspire for the biggest. If you decide not to go for it, that's fine. But then you've gotten all those new experiences under your belt, for sure. So the service is huge, but also hanging around people in those positions that you want to pivot into.
Right. And I think one of the underlying themes through this, though, too, is you have to be authentic.
Yep.
As you do all of this, you cannot be fake. You will be, pretty quickly, people will see really if you are genuine and authentic, and if you are really passionate and committed to what you're doing and what you are trying to provide to our industry, intercollegiate athletics. People really learn and understand your value system. And we all know at different points in our careers, we cross paths with people that, it's like they're the movers and the shakers, and they think that they're going to the big job and everything, and you just shake your head saying, I don't know if they're going to be able to keep doing that because it's not real. So, okay, experienced administrators. What advice would you give to an experienced administrator who is facing the challenge of kind of whether they should take that next step in their career, whether it should be that position, the AD position, commissioner position, or anything. We talked a little bit about this last night, and with some of our senior level women administrators, and what advice would you give them, or any thoughts for the rest of the group to kind of think about that we may even have discussed last evening?
It's interesting. My first knee-jerk reaction is to go for it. I just think, again, we are capable of so much more. I know, and I said this last night, even with women, and some of the women that have advanced have said it's easier to manage family and kids when you're the boss because you have more control over your schedule. On the other side of that, I will tell you, the leap from number 2 to number 1 is greater than anything you could possibly imagine or prepare for. So when all the women, that have advanced and we talk to them on the way up, none of them regret it. Some of them say, that they do have more flexibility, but they all say, wow, the first year is a killer year, and there's no way to prepare for the volume. It's the more volume of stuff that you need in your brain to make all the decisions, just the volume of information you're involved in, and the pace of that. And we're trying to figure out in our programming how we prepare, how we can help people prepare for that. I don't know if you can, but you need to know it, that it's seismic, it is beyond. But at the same time, I think anymore, I'm not sure you can just make blanket statements to people about what their life is about. I said last night, I think the career path is a spiritual journey more. It's about who you are and how you show up in the world and what you're meant to do. And you know that better than Lynn or I or anybody else. So you have to know what you want out of life. But I also think as humans, we need to be pushed a little. So many times someone has said, I needed to hear that. I needed to hear that. I needed to hear it. I needed several people to encourage me to go for this job. And, I don't know that it's a lack of confidence. It is like, God, I do have a really good thing. And so why do I want to take that risk? I think that's a personal decision people need to make. But at the same time, I think we need more women leaders at the top. I think we need more diversity in leadership. And, it is interesting study that why the men, which is great, I think it's fantastic, they just go for it. They're not having the same internal conversations over and over that we as women are, and a huge part of that is, women with family and kids, that's a huge part of it, that they are the primary caretakers. But, there's a lot of single women that still have that conversation more than men do. I think it's great how men go for it, and I think there are characteristics of that as women that we can take on a little bit.
Okay, so we're going to open it up now for some questions from the group. When you ask your question, we'll try to repeat it for the benefit of the video that's being streamed. So we'll take a few questions here, and then we'll close out the session and allow some mingling to take place. So questions for Patti.
Or Lynn. Yeah, Stace.
Can you share some of the programs that NACWAA provides, young professionals and through the process?
Yes. So the question is sharing some of the programs that NACWAA provides. So thanks for the question. I actually have a bunch of handouts because I won't remember everything. We have an advancement roadmap, and it goes through 5 different stages. If you're just in the industry, kind of, and then you're mid-level, what kind of programs do we have? But we have leadership institutes for all levels. The Women's Leadership Symposium is the entry level. We have level 1 is the Institute for Administrative Advancement. Level 2 is Leadership Enhancement Institute. And level 3 is Executive Institute. Executive Institute is for women that specifically say they want to become ADs and commissioners in the next 2 to 4 years, to help them with those little last tweaks that we need as leaders to get there. We have, what we've tried to do, and we talked about this last night, is create more programs for our members to support each other because you all are the experts. We are doing more intentional competencies around leadership. We're working with the Center for Creative Leadership. How do we become better leaders, decision makers, strategic thinkers, leaders in life and leaders in industry? As far as industry nuances, we think you are the experts. So we're trying to create platforms for our members to connect with each other through circles. We have a formal mentoring program, which has a huge success rate. The number of people that have been hired by their mentors is astonishing and outstanding. And that's when, I always say, I think the NACWAA convention is our mentor program because that's when you make these connections and those things happen. But we also have a more formal one where people can sign up and be matched more intentionally if you want to change divisions and things like that. And we're expanding our online resources. We know people can't get to conventions and institutes, and so we have all sorts of pathways, written programs. If you want to know how someone got to where they are, Lynn will write about her career path. It's called Pathways. We have our Women's Leadership Spotlight that we do all the time, a video series. So, in the categories, we have leadership, we have members serving members, and then we also have online learning tools. And we're constantly, obviously, trying to expand and grow in that area, for sure.
So real quickly, talk a little bit about how, obviously NACWAA is an organization that most all of the members are women. I know there's some males that are also members, but talk about how NACWAA works with NACWA that tends to have more males just by virtue of the fact there's more male ADs. But how do you kind of bridge the gap between some of these gender issues within college athletics and those partnerships? We're
actually we're talking with NACWA right now on a more formal partnership around minorities and people of color advancing, and so we're in the early stages of that. I'm a huge collaborator. I believe that collaboration is how we all succeed, and that there's room for everybody, men and women. There's room for everybody to do what they want to do, because we all are meant to do what we're supposed to do. I'm not supposed to do what Lynn's supposed to do or anyone else. We're supposed to do what we're supposed to do. So these associations that help people in different ways are fabulous, and we got to figure out ways to cross over. I do think, though, there is a gender issue, obviously, in intercollegiate athletics. And you know what? The folks at NACWA get it, too. They've been great supporters of ours. We've done a lot at their convention. A lot of people, it's easier to get to NACWA than NACWA. We've had leadership programs there for the last 3 years. Now, this year, we're going to be working through the smaller groups. I think we have something at COSIDA this year in June at the NACWA convention, as well as the fundraising group. I can't remember all the NAD something, development, something like NAD. And so they're great. We've had receptions there. So they have said, whatever we can do, we have a great relationship. Been out there and spent time with them. They've been out with us. So, and that's really important.
All right, another question?
You mentioned you're an avid reader. Can you share the title of your favorite?
The problem is I read so many, I have a hard time remembering. Right now I'm reading The Charged Life by Brendan Bouchard. I'm into podcasts I listen to, and so his podcast is awesome. I got his book. And by the way, his book is free. You have to pay for shipping. $7, so there you go. I read The Confidence Code recently, really interesting about women's confidence and how confidence is learned and earned, by the way. It's not like someone is gifted with more than another. We can intentionally grow our confidence. And so we've incorporated a lot of that into our programs. And then what was the other one? Obviously, Lean In was a year ago. That was a big title. Some of my titles aren't real big. I've done the Jack Welch's and this and that. But it's funny. If it comes across my desk in some way, I feel like I'm supposed to read it. So I read a lot of random things. So The Charged Life. Let's charge up. That's where I'm at right now.
Jeannie?
I hear from a lot of young administrators that they want to be, or young aspiring administrators, that they want to be sport administrators. They want to work with sports, yet they have no sports background. And I think actually it's the most difficult skill to develop as an administrator. You can teach spreadsheets easily.
Yep.
You can teach, gender equity. You can teach building, relationships with your peers and cooperating. But that sport administration piece, because coaches are so unique.
Yep.
Dynamics of parents and student athletes today. What would you recommend for developing skills as an experienced administrator and a young administrator in that field?
That's a great question that has come up, and so we're going to follow up after this and put our heads together and create an initiative. Seriously, because there's a lot of women, and the question was about creating, how do you become a great sport administrator? You did say something that I think is key, is relational. And becoming, and we talk about that every day in our office, in our programs. I'm surprised it hadn't been weaved in, but learning how to be relational, this emotional intelligence piece, is the biggest thing with leadership right now. And that's what's so important when you talk about coaches being hard to work with, understanding how to relate to other people. And the reason why people that have played sports are better at it, because they've been in that position and they understand the highs and the lows, or the wins and the losses. And so part of that is getting into someone else's shoes. That is relational. That's emotional intelligence. But your specific question is a good one that we're trying to figure out, because there's a lot more women wanting to get into athletics now, into administration, that didn't play sports, which is fabulous. But we can't say that one thing should hold them back. I don't have the answer. I think again, modeling and mentoring is huge, but they have to be relational and understand the business of sport. You would think they could pick up some of that. I think it'd be real hard to come from a non-athlete compliance background into that, although the compliance folks are the ones interacting with everyone on really tough subjects, so that maybe that could be an advantage. I don't have the gold star answer for that. I think it's something we're working on and we need to communicate more on, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question before we do some of our closeout questions the list I have. Anyone else? Okay. All right, so to close out the session here, how many people have ever watched Inside the Actors Studio? Okay, we just all aged ourselves, most of us. Okay, so it's a show, I think it may have been on Bravo or something like that. James Lipton hosts it, and I watch weird things, apparently, but it's not weird. It's a great show. So he typically, as the host, have you seen this?
Yes. Okay,
so as the host, he sits there. At the end of the session, there's a standard list of questions that he asks. Those that have watched it, I'm not asking all the questions because this is family-friendly, and it's a West Coast Conference event, and we will not be saying any curse words. Okay? All right, here we go. And these are quick, one-hit questions with quick answers, no explanation. People can ask you why you said it later.
Okay.
All right? What's your favorite word?
Intention.
What's your least favorite word?
Can't.
What motivates you creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Ooh. What motivates me and probably sustains me is actually working out. I don't know if I was supposed to say a sentence. Working out. Or running.
We'll take it. We'll take it. All right. What turns you off?
Negativity.
What sound or noise do you love?
Birds chirping.
That's a good one. What sound or noise do you hate?
What sound or noise do I hate? Slot machines?
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Be a rock star?
On stage?
Yeah.
Oh.
Play the guitar. I have zero talent.
What profession would you never like to do?
Oh. Probably be a brain surgeon.
Okay, and the last one. We're hitting it home here, okay?
Mm-hmm.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Wow. You made a difference.
All right. All right, let's get it up for Patti. Thank you.
And Lenny. Framing your future. This is awesome.
All right. Thanks, everyone.